Case number 1, female, age 17, injury severe, suitable for procedure. Her name was Anarcha. He did not write that part.
She was listed in his journal as case number 1. Not a name, a number. The year was 1845. He was a doctor in Montgomery, Alabama. She was an enslaved woman on a plantation outside the city. He leased her from her owner. He built a small hospital behind his house. She was taken inside. Over the next 4 years, she did not leave. Her name was Anarcha. And what J. Marion Sims did to her body inside that hidden ward was recorded in his own hand, published in his own journals, and celebrated by the American medical establishment for over a century. This is the documented story of what happened behind that wall. In the spring of 1845, J. Marion Sims was a respected physician in Montgomery. He had a practice, he had a reputation, he had the trust of every plantation owner in the county. They brought him their enslaved workers when something was wrong. He fixed them. He returned them. He sent an invoice. He was reliable. He was precise. He was admired. His neighbors saw a doctor. His patients saw a benefactor. The plantation owners saw an asset. No one looked behind the house. He'd already begun. Welcome to Dark History USA, the channel where plantation records, court files, and documented evidence bring back the names that history tried to erase. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, did you learn this story in school? Yes or no? And where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city below. If you have not subscribed yet, subscribe now, so these records are never forgotten again. What Sims built behind his house was not a clinic. It was not a charity ward. The women inside it had no legal right to refuse, no legal right to leave. And when the procedures were done, no legal right to speak. But someone wrote their names down. That record survived. What it contains, we will get to. But first, you need to understand the world that made this possible, and the one decision made in a county courthouse in 1844 that put Anarcha inside that building. Sims published everything, the procedures, the outcomes, the number of operations. He was not hiding his work from the medical establishment. He was hiding something else entirely. Before the hospital, before the journal, before case number 1. There was a morning. It was early spring, 1844. The air in Macon County, Alabama, carried the smell of wet soil and pine. The cotton fields were not yet planted. The ground was still soft from winter rain. Anarcha was 17 years old. She woke before sunrise, as she always did. The cabin she shared with 3 other women was dark, the only light a thin gray line beneath the door. She dressed in the dark. She knew every corner of that cabin by touch, the rough texture of the wooden wall, the cold, packed earth beneath her feet, the sound of breathing from the women sleeping beside her. She was small in frame, but precise in her movements, the kind of person who does not waste motion. Those who knew her later described her as someone who observed everything and said only what was necessary. She had a name that her owner had not given her. Among the people in the quarters, she was called by something else, a name passed down from her mother. What that name was, no record preserved. Only the name Anarcha survived. The name he wrote in his journal. She was 17. She was pregnant. And she was about to go through a labor that would leave her with an injury her body could not heal on its own. That injury, a vesico-vaginal fistula, was the reason J. Marion Sims said he needed her. The record does not document what Anarcha knew or felt that morning, or any morning before she was taken to the ward behind Sims's house. But the testimony of women who survived similar conditions in that era described a particular kind of dread. Not loud, not sharp, but steady, like a weight that never fully lifted. That weight had a name. It was the knowledge that your body did not belong to you. What Anarcha did not know that spring morning was that, within months, her name would be written in a medical journal, not as a person, as a case. And that journal would survive 180 years. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. But before we go inside that ward, you need to understand the system that made it legal. Every door that closed behind Anarcha had a law behind it. That law had a name, too. Montgomery, Alabama, 1844. It was the capital of a state built on cotton. The streets of Montgomery were wide and dusty, lined with merchants, lawyers, and landowners who moved through the world as if it had been arranged specifically for them. The air smelled of horse, tobacco, and fresh-cut lumber. A new building went up every month. The city was growing. It was also, by 1844, one of the most active slave-trading markets in the American South. The auction block at the center of Montgomery was not hidden. It stood in public. Buyers examined human beings the way they examined livestock, checking teeth, testing grip strength, assessing weight. This was the world J. Marion Sims operated in. Sims had arrived in Montgomery in 1835, a young physician from South Carolina with ambition and a growing reputation. By 1844, he had established himself as the most trusted doctor among the plantation-owning class of Montgomery and Macon counties. His patients were wealthy white families, but his subjects, the people he practiced on, experimented on, learned from, were enslaved. This was not unusual. It was policy. In 1844, Alabama, an enslaved person had no legal standing to refuse medical treatment. Their owner's consent was the only consent that existed under law. If a planter decided his enslaved workers needed to be examined, treated, or, as in this case, used for experimental surgery, no court would intervene. No complaint could be filed. No record of objection would be kept. The system did not just allow what Sims did. It created the conditions that made it inevitable. Sims had been treating enslaved women on surrounding plantations for years, primarily for obstetric injuries, the kind that resulted from difficult labors with no medical support. Vesicovaginal fistula was common among these women. It was painful, debilitating, and in 1844 considered surgically incurable. Sims believed he could fix it. He needed subjects to practice on. He sent word to the plantation owners of Macon County. He told them he was conducting research. He told them the women would be housed, fed, and returned when the work was done. The owners agreed. They signed the paperwork. Their signatures are still in the record. At the time, no one questioned the arrangement. Sims was respected. The owners were cooperative. The women had no voice in the transaction. But one detail in the paperwork, a single line in a lease agreement dated late 1844, would become the first crack in the official story. That line would not surface for another 150 years. Anarcha was born into slavery on a plantation in Macon County, Alabama. The exact date of her birth is not recorded, based on Sims' own journal entries, which describe her as approximately 17 at the time of her first surgery in 1845. Historians place her birth around 1828. She was a field worker. The records from the plantation where she was held describe her simply as a female laborer, valued at $600. That number, $600, is the only valuation her owner put on paper, $600. She was pregnant in the winter of 1844. Her labor, when it came, was long and severe. The baby did not survive, and Anarcha emerged from that labor with a vesico-vaginal fistula, a tear between the bladder and the birth canal that caused her continuous, uncontrollable pain. She could not work. To her owner, she was now worth less than $600. This is when Sims was contacted. What the records do not tell us, and what no document preserved, is who Anarcha was before that winter, what she thought about, what she was good at, whether she had a name for herself that no one outside the quarters ever heard. The record does not document her inner world, but accounts from formerly enslaved women in similar conditions collected by the WPA Federal Writers Project in the 1930s described a particular kind of interior life. Careful, watchful, deeply private. A life lived behind the eyes, where no overseer could reach. Those who encountered Anarcha in the months after her injury described her as composed, not broken, composed. That composure would matter later. In late 1844 or early 1845, the exact date is disputed. Anarcha was transported from the plantation in Macon County to a small wooden structure behind J. Marion Sims's house on Perry Street in Montgomery. She walked through a door. The records do not note whether she looked back, but inside that building, over the next 4 years, something would happen that Sims did not predict. Anarcha would become the most medically documented enslaved woman in American history, not because anyone intended to remember her, because Sims could not stop writing about her. The first surgery on Anarcha was performed in the spring of 1845. Sims recorded it in his journal. The procedure lasted approximately 1 hour. There was no anesthesia. Sims believed, and wrote explicitly, that black women had a higher tolerance for pain than white women. This belief was not unique to him. It was the medical consensus of the era. It was taught in medical schools. It appeared in textbooks. It was also completely false. Anarcha was conscious for every minute of that first surgery, and every surgery after it. Sims's journal entries from 1845 to 1849 document the procedures in clinical detail: dates, instruments used, duration, outcomes. He was meticulous. He was precise. He believed he was advancing science. The journal records 30 operations on Anarcha alone. 30. Between each surgery, Anarcha recovered inside the ward. The building was small: wooden walls, a dirt floor, a few cots, the smell of carbolic and cotton dressing, the sound of Montgomery going about its business on the other side of the wall. She was not alone. By 1846, Sims had leased 6 other enslaved women from surrounding plantations: Lucy, Betsey, and 4 others whose names appear only once in his records, then disappear. The women were not paid. They were not compensated. They were not released between procedures. The ward behind Sims' house was, by every legal and physical definition, a place of confinement. What happened inside those walls between surgeries The conversations, the silences, the way the women moved through that small space together. No record preserved. No document confirms what passed between them. But historians who have studied the WPA testimonies of women held in similar medical confinement describe a particular solidarity. Quiet, careful, invisible to the men outside. A language made of small gestures. The record is silent here. But a pattern in the documents tells its own story. By 1847, Sims had refined his surgical technique. He had invented a new speculum, a medical instrument still used today. He would later name it after himself. He built his reputation on what he learned inside that ward. The women taught him everything he knew. He did not put their names on the instrument. One word. How does this make you feel? Leave it in the comments. But here is what Sims did not account for. He published everything, the dates, the procedures, the number of operations, the names of his subjects. He published it in the American Journal of the Medical Sciences in 1852. He thought publication was proof of achievement. It was also proof of something else entirely. That proof would take over a century to be fully understood. But when it was, it would bring his statues down. J. Marion Sims left Montgomery in 1853. He moved to New York City. He founded the Woman's Hospital, the first hospital in America dedicated to women's health. He was celebrated. He was elected president of the American Medical Association in 1876. A statue was erected in his honor in Central Park. For over a century, the official history of J. Marion Sims contained no mention of Anarcha, no mention of Lucy, no mention of Betsey. The erasure was not accidental. It was architectural. The first serious challenge to the official record came in 1976, when historian G.J. Barker Benfield published a paper examining Sims' original 1852 journal article. Barker Benfield was not looking for scandal. He was conducting a routine academic review of 19th century gynecological history. What he found, in Sims's own words, stopped him. The journal article contained explicit documentation that the surgeries had been performed without anesthesia, not because anesthesia was unavailable, but because Sims had chosen not to use it. Chloroform and ether were both available in Montgomery. By 1847, Sims used them on his white patients. He did not use them on Anarcha. He did not use them on Lucy. He did not use them on Betsey. This single detail, buried in plain sight in a published medical journal for 124 years, became the first piece of evidence in a case that would take decades to fully build. Over the following 30 years, more researchers followed. Medical ethicists, historians of slavery, black women, scholars who had been asking these questions for years and had been systematically ignored. Each one found the same thing. Not rumor, not speculation. Sims's own handwriting. In 1989, historian Dorinda Ojenuga published a formal academic paper, The Medical Ethics of the Father of Gynecology, documenting the systematic nature of the experiments and the deliberate exclusion of consent. The medical establishment did not immediately respond, but the record had been opened. And once a record is opened, it cannot be closed again. By 2017, the case could no longer be ignored. In the spring of 2017, J. Marion Sims's statue still stood in Central Park, New York City. It had stood there since 1894. For 123 years, people had walked past it every day. Joggers, tourists, schoolchildren. Most did not know who he was. The plaque said simply, "Father of Modern Gynecology." It said nothing about Anarcha. It said nothing about 30 operations. It said nothing about the ward behind the house on Perry Street. What Sims had not anticipated, what no one in 1894 had anticipated, was that his own journal would survive, that his own words would be read by people he had not written them for, that the women he had not named on his instruments would be named by someone else. In 2017, a coalition of medical ethicists, historians, and community activists in New York City formally petitioned the city to remove the statue. Their petition cited Sims's own published records, his own dates, his own case numbers. They did not need to prove anything he had not already written down. The debate that followed was loud and public. Defenders of the statue argued that Sims must be understood in the context of his time, that his contributions to medicine were real, that removal was erasure of history. The activists had a precise answer. The erasure, they said, had already happened. It happened when Anarcha's name was left off the instrument. It happened when Lucy's name did not appear in the medical school curriculum. It happened when Betsey was listed as case number 3 in a journal that made Sims famous. One woman stood at the public hearing and spoke directly into the record. Her name was Carolyn Tanner. She was a descendant of an enslaved woman from Macon County, Alabama. She said 7 words. Her name was Anarcha. Remember it. No document confirms what happened in that hearing room after those words were spoken, but those who were present later described a particular silence, the kind that falls when something true has been said out loud for the first time in a room that was not ready for it. The record does not capture that silence, but it captures what came next. By April 2018, there was enough. On April 17, 2018, the statue of J. Marion Sims was removed from Central Park. The New York City Public Design Commission voted unanimously. The crane arrived at dawn. By mid-morning, the pedestal was empty. The official statement from the city cited his use of enslaved women as experimental subjects without anesthesia or consent. It cited the documented record. It cited his own journal. His own words brought the statue down. The statue was relocated to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, where Sims is buried. It stands there now, in a cemetery, visible to no one who did not go looking for it. His name remains in medical textbooks. The Sims speculum is still used in gynecological examinations today. That has not been resolved. Now, Anarcha. What happened to her after 1849, after the last recorded surgery, is not documented in Sims' journal. He does not record her release. He does not record her return to the plantation. He does not record her death. She simply disappears from his notes. But she did not disappear from history. In 2018, the same year Sims's statue came down, a monument was erected in Montgomery, Alabama, on the grounds of the Legacy Museum. It is a statue of 3 women. Their names are written at the base. Anarcha Lucy Betsey. They are standing, not sitting, not kneeling, standing. The sculptor was asked why she chose that posture. She said, because they endured, and endurance is not the same as defeat. Anarcha was 17 when she walked through that door. She did not choose what happened inside, but her name is now in stone, His statue is in a cemetery. Hers is in the light. This record still exists. Others do not. If this story stayed with you tonight, leave one word in the comments, just one word. Her name was Anarcha.